Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming online. We're really excited to be having this webinar today on study abroad safety. I'm very appreciative for all of you who took the time to hop on board to think about this really important topic that we think about here at the department, our friends at the State Department think about, and folks I know at higher ed institutions across the country spend a lot of time thinking about. Summer is coming up pretty soon, and I know that means a lot of really exciting travel for a lot of faculty and a lot of students and a lot of staff. It's a a great opportunity for learning abroad, but we also want to make sure that faculty and staff and students are equipped with the best knowledge possible to make the best decisions while they are overseas to ensure their safety. So we have with us a few great presenters today. We've got with us Amber Hanson from the U.S. Department of State. Amber is the country officer for American Citizen Services and Crisis Management. That's a mouthful. We also have with us, Maureen Handrahan from Michigan State University. Maureen is the coordinator for international health and safety. She'll be sharing some of her thoughts. We also have with us Dan Spiess from the University of Chicago. Dan's the assistant director for postdoctoral affairs and career development. So thank you all for being here. I know we've got a lot of material to cover. Just a few housekeeping notes. We'll have a Q&A period towards the end of our session today. You can input your questions into the chat box, and we will also be taking questions on our Twitter feed, which is @GoGlobalEd. That's @GoGlobalEd on Twitter, so we'll be taking questions that way as well. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started, and I'll turn it over to Amber. Amber, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I work for the Office of Overseas Citizen Services for the State Department. Today's presentation will focus on some areas where we're helping U.S. citizens abroad. Some of the topics that we're going to cover are topics that you've heard of before, but there are also new relevant topics that we're going to cover as well. Our primary responsibility is to help U.S. citizens overseas, and we do this in a variety of different ways. We work very closely, my office does, with our embassies and consulates in providing consular services to U.S. citizens traveling or living abroad. We do everything from passport issuance to arrest visits to handling a crisis should a crisis happen as well. We want to make sure that the public is informed of where they're traveling to and the risks and benefits to traveling to those countries. We have a variety of products that we create on our website on travel.state.gov. And on this website, we have our country-specific information sheets. We also have our travel warnings and travel alerts. And we have information regarding our embassies and some of those country-specific information sheets link to our embassy's websites for our security messages that we publish to make sure that U.S. citizens are informed should a threat exist in that country. Our country-specific information sheets go over a variety of things. We have a safety and security section. We have immigration and visa restrictions. It covers also like how much money you can bring into the country and how much money you can bring out of the country. It talks about health conditions, such as what types of health issues exist. We also talk about minor political disturbances that occur in the country, such as it has been known to operate in a certain area. We also talk about unusual currency restrictions, crime and security information, drug penalties, and also LBGT travel safety. So what is that country's laws regarding LBGT issues? As I previously mentioned, we also publish on our travel.state.gov website travel warnings and travel alerts. And basically, we have a policy called no double standard that exists. So if we warn our U.S. Embassy personnel of a particular threat to that country, we are obligated by law to also inform the U.S. citizen population. Basically, it has to be a specific, credible, and non-counterable threat. And to do this, we collaborate with our regional security officers who are at our embassies to see if the threat exists and what we should be saying to our embassy personnel and also to our private U.S. citizens. Travel warnings are for long-term protracted conditions that make a country dangerous or unstable. So these are things that are going to exist for a long period of time. We also publish travel alerts, and travel alerts are typically for short periods. We do those during political elections, for instance. We published a travel alert in April for the political elections for Djibouti, because there was a chance that there could be violence that erupts during this, or demonstrations and protests that occur. And so we wanted the U.S. citizen population to be aware of it, so we published a travel alert. And in our travel alert, it mentions when it expires. As I mentioned also, we have security and emergency messages that occur. Security messages are for things that are going to be not as imminent. Emergency messages are sent out for things that are very imminent, such as we need to get the information out now. Security messages, again, warn U.S. citizens about a particular threat for the country that is going on. Emergency messages also warn about a particular threat, but we also send out emergency messages if we need to get the information out as soon as possible regarding violent demonstrations that are occurring in the country or of an attack that had just occurred. We also send out messages regarding demonstrations. They are sent out as a message as well, a security message to basically tell U.S. citizens that there's a demonstration occurring at this particular event. Please monitor local events and review your personal security and try not to get mixed up in the demonstration that's occurring in that country. We coordinate a lot with our Overseas Security Advisory Council, OSAC. Many of you are probably members of OSAC or your university is. And basically, OSAC is a great place for constituent groups for academic and study abroad organizations. Your membership into that organization is free. And in it, with OSAC membership, you get an in-depth analysis of the security situations in those countries, and also they review our travel warnings and travel alerts. You can actually go to OSAC's website and view their information, and they actually post our security messages that are sent out by our embassies as well. We work really closely with them as well should a situation erupt in a foreign country, such as if there was a terrorist-related event that occurred, we will work with OSAC to make sure that we're both communicating with that university regarding their students that are there. We also have the State Department also has the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, which is our U.S. Study Abroad office. There's on travel.state.gov as well, you can actually put into the search engine Study Abroad, and it will bring you to our Study Abroad website. On it, we contain information for women travelers, also for LGBT issues. It's really important, especially for different population groups, that they're informed as they're traveling overseas of the risks associated or things just to be aware of. We also encourage people to get enrolled into our Smart Traveler Enrollment Program through step.state.gov. Through this, you can register and you can put in a time period that you're in the country for, and when you register for that, you'll get our security messages as they come out. You'll put your email address in, and you'll get those messages. My mom actually registered in STEP when we traveled overseas, and she was so excited that she was getting these messages from the State Department, and that she was informed of all the messages going out. So she was telling us constantly, well, the State Department says not to go here right now, or so I really encourage it. It's a great tool for you for us to get in contact with you right away. It's also a great tool, for instance, if there was a crisis that happened in the country, you put in your contact information and we can reach out to you to say, hey, are you okay? When a crisis does happen, we do get calls from family members that are in the United States about their loved ones, and with that, we have to be very careful what we say to them, because U.S. citizens are protected under the Privacy Act, and so with that, we cannot just divulge information to your family members without having something signed saying we're allowed to do that. So some of the, like I stated before at the beginning of the presentation, some of the services we provide are consular sections at post do. If you are arrested, which I hope students abroad try not to get arrested, But we will visit you. So we have this thing called consular notification access. So basically, if you're arrested in a foreign country and you say you're a U.S. citizen, they have a certain time period basically to inform the embassy of your detainment. So I would highly encourage, if any of your students are arrested, that they do go ahead and say, I would like a visit from our embassy. And our consular individuals will go and visit the individual to make sure that they are okay. We cannot act as a lawyer. We cannot personally intervene on your behalf with the police to let you go. But we can make sure that you are being treated fairly according to all the laws of that country, not of the U.S., but of that country. We also provide emergency passports. I've been duty officer, which is a program that we have where someone's on call all the time in case there's something that happens. And a lot of people get concerned that their child has lost their passport overseas and, like, how are they going to get back to the U.S.? So we provide emergency passports as well. They're called EPDPs, and we provide them so that they can travel back to the United States on that particular passport. It's not a full validity passport, so it's only good for a certain period of time. We also do provide services in medical emergencies. We help identify medical resources. We do not pay hospital bills. And we are not doctors, so you can't call us and say, well, I'm feeling this way, do I have malaria? We're not going to provide you that guidance, but we will make sure that you have the medical resources that are in that country so that then you can pick who you should see. On all of our embassy websites, if you go to the U.S. Citizen Services page, it actually has links to attorneys and also to, it has a doctor's list as well. We will also help you identify financial resources should you get put in the hospital. So we have programs such as an OCS Trust, it's called, where family members through Western Union can send money to you. It goes to our embassy, and then we disperse that based upon the what it's allowed to be dispersed for. If the individual who has a medical emergency signs a Privacy Act, then we can basically notify their friends and family should they desire. We can help coordinate medical evacuations. Again, not to pay for medical evacuations, but we can help coordinate and work with different service providers in that country to get you back to the United States. We also do these things called welfare and whereabouts visits, which means typically my office, the Office of Overseas Citizen Services, or our consular section at Post will get a phone call saying, I haven't heard from my loved one in X amount of time. I'm very concerned that I haven't heard, so I'm like that person. So we will do welfare and whereabouts visits, which means we will try to locate the individual and check on their welfare to make sure that they are okay. Again, they are covered under the Privacy Act, so we can't necessarily tell you what that conversation occurred unless that loved one says that we can, or that friend says that we can. This is really important, and we do actually over 30,000 welfare whereabouts visits, and it's a great way for us to just check on people to make sure that they are doing okay. I do encourage people that are studying abroad to check in with their parents frequently, especially it's very, very important because we get a lot of phone calls at times where I haven't heard from my daughter in 12 hours or 24 hours, and parents begin to be very concerned about this. So we do encourage study abroad students to check in with their parents frequently, and also to make sure that their parents are aware of the expectations of travel time and those types of things. When I was traveling overseas for the first time when I was younger, my mom was one of those parents who got concerned after me not talking to her for like 8 hours. So that's just something I would encourage everyone to do. We also have a crisis response aspect of it. As I spoke earlier, we have duty officers that are on call 24/7. So when our office is closed, there's a duty officer that's on call. Our embassies also have duty officers that are on call as well after hours. We have an operations center that operates 24/7. We have a crisis management team. We have a big crisis management team at our headquarters building, and then we have a consular crisis management team as well to help handle situations that are up, such as the attack in Brussels that occurred, or the situation in South Sudan that occurred a couple of years ago, or the Westgate mall situation in Kenya that occurred in 2013. Our contact center is 24/7. If you go to our travel.state.gov website, there will be like a 188 number that you can find that gives you access basically to call should you have an emergency, and it's after hours. When an emergency happens, we do have a task force that usually convenes, and a consular person is always, from our office, is always part of that task force, so that we can field inquiries from people coming in, and we can make sure that information is getting out that needs to get out to people who are caught up in the emergency situation. We also deal with a variety of things, so like death in estate cases. So if you die overseas, we issue a thing called a consular report of death abroad. Basically, it serves as almost comparable to like a U.S.-based birth certificate. We also assist family members to make sure that however they want their loved ones remains to come back to the United States, that we help facilitate that. Last year, in 2014, we had over 11,000 U.S. citizens who died outside of the United States. We also notify the next of kin. So when someone dies overseas, whoever their next of kin is, we reach out to them and we say, your loved one has passed away. And we give them a variety of information as well. We also offer financial assistance for a repatriation program. Basically, if someone is destitute in a foreign country, they can apply for our repatriation program, and if they meet the qualifications, then we will loan them money, basically. The U.S. government will to come back to the United States, and then they have to pay that money back. We repatriate over about 1,300 people in 2014. We also have a program called Emergency and Dietary Assistance. So, for instance, if you're destitute in a foreign country and you're waiting on money to come to you, but you need a small loan, if you meet the qualifications, we will loan you a small amount of money. We have a victims assistance program as well. So, for instance, if someone is, unfortunately it does happen, if someone is raped overseas, we will work with our victims assistance specialist to get them the necessary resources needed. Basically with this, we'll liaise with local authorities, provide them organizations, and also offer them a list of like U.S. victims assistance programs when they return to the U.S. This can include victims of crime, kidnappings, terrorism. Like I said, rape, unfortunately, is a big problem that can occur at times. We also provide a federal benefits program, so Social Security and VA benefits. If you're living overseas and you want your Social Security check, we can help you out with that. We document U.S. citizens, so we provide first-time passports or consular report of birth abroad. If you are overseas on the study abroad program, you can also vote, and our embassies have lots of information about voting, especially as the election cycles come in this year. It's very important that we make sure people are informed of their rights regarding voting overseas. We highly encourage people when they're overseas to get medical insurance, particularly. Most medical insurances are not covered once you're outside of the United States, so it's important for people to check with their insurance coverage to make sure that they are covered when they get overseas. And I think a lot of people are surprised when they're not covered and they wind up with a very large hospital bill. Some countries actually will not allow you to leave the country until you have paid your hospital bill, or will not allow you to leave the hospital until your hospital bill is paid in full. And so that's something we really try to encourage for people. When I was on a abroad program in grad school, I was in Tanzania, and my roommate got an appendicitis, and she did not have overseas medical insurance, so it ended up being quite a big bill that she had to pay before she could come back to the United States. We encourage you to visit our website, which is travel.state.gov, our Students Abroad website. We also have information about inter-country adoptions and abductions. But I really encourage people to be informed when they travel overseas, because I think that's a big thing that people have a lot of concerns about, and we get a lot of questions and phone calls about. So I know with one university in particular a couple of years ago, they were looking at expanding into a different country. And when they were looking at expanding, they would call the State Department and say, hey, like, you guys have a travel warning for this country. What does that actually mean? What do you actually mean? And so we go through the travel. And in those circumstances with the travel warnings, we'll actually go, I will spend time as a country officer going through the travel warnings that abroad program is fully aware of the risks associated with traveling to that country. And especially because travel warnings can be issued at any point in time, and travel alerts can be issued at any point in time as well. And so we'll spend time just really going through all that information, and we'll work with our OSAC colleagues as well to make sure that everyone has it. If you have any questions, we really do encourage you to call us. You have I told you about the 1-8 number. It's 1-888-407-4747, and you can ask to speak to the country officer for that particular country. So if you have students going to India, for instance, then you can have talk with our India country officer. Again, our big things are get informed about where you're going, get your documents, make sure that your passports, your study abroad students, their passports are good for at least 6 months on them, because a lot of countries won't allow you to enter unless you actually have those 2 blank pages in them. We encourage, again, get enrolled in our STEP program, the Smart Travel Enrollment Program, and call home, and if you haven't heard from your study abroad students, just give it some time, and then, and I'm sure they'll reach out as soon as possible. So if you have any questions, happy to answer at the end of the presentation, and it was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, Amber. So now we're going to turn it over to Maureen Handrahan, who is an international coordinator for international health and safety at Michigan State University.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. So like we said, my name is Maureen Handrahan. I'm the coordinator for international health and safety at Michigan State University. And I'm part of an office called the Office for International Health and Safety, and we oversee health, safety, and security for all of MSU's international travelers. And I particularly, in my role as coordinator, work closely with the Office of Study Abroad. So today I'm going to talk about some of the ways you as an institution can build capacity specifically related to health and safety for your study abroad programs. I'm sure many of you in attendance, some of the things that I'll be discussing are going to be structures and processes that you already have in place at your institution, but I am hoping to go over some ways that we promote safe study abroad at MSU so that maybe some institutions looking to expand your capacity will receive some helpful tips, and also maybe just some institutions who are just sort of interested in how we do things at MSU will have that insight as well. So in terms of an outline, I wanted to structure my presentation in a way that sort of looks at answering 3 main questions. So the first being, why is it important to build health and safety capacity? The second question being, who is responsible for health and safety when it comes to study abroad programs? And then the last is, how can we build health and safety capacity for our study abroad programs? And then I'll also be wrapping up our conversation with just some general tips for promoting safe study abroad. So just to get started with the question of why should we consider health and safety, anytime I give a presentation on health and safety at MSU, I always open with this overview of the concept of duty of care, because it's really core to why our office exists at MSU. We exist to enact MSU's duty of care towards those international travelers. Specifically, duty of care refers to the legal and moral obligation to protect, as best we can, members of the university community when they travel abroad, either on university programs or in conducting university business. It's this principle that we bear in mind when we're developing our travel policies, when we're drafting procedures, when we're responding to crises, etc. One key to enacting duty of care is understanding that it works best when it's done in collaboration, which means basically that the institution owes a duty of care to its international travelers, but also that our international travelers owe a duty of care to the institution, which is to say that, we try to establish a reciprocal relationship such that the travelers are active participants in our processes to help keep them safe when they travel abroad on behalf of the university. I also wanted to go over the Forum on Education Abroad. I'm sure many of you participating are very familiar with the standards that are laid out by the forum, but I wanted to draw your attention to Standard 8 specifically. This is a standard that deals with health, safety, security, and risk management. If you are looking to codify some of your own health, safety, and security procedures and policies, I really suggest reviewing the Forum on Education Abroad Standard 8. I think it's both a helpful starting point and a useful guide to be continually referring back to as you build your study abroad capacity. If those two sort of broad principles aren't enough to convince you that it's important to care about health and safety, then maybe I might be able to persuade you with a highly pragmatic reason, which is that I can almost guarantee you that something will happen on a study abroad program. And I'm sure this is not news to anyone listening in. This is probably a fact that we are all too familiar with. But on this slide, I have listed just a few examples of some of the incidents that have impacted MSU study abroad travelers just in the last academic year. Fortunately, in all of these instances, there's fairly minimal impact on our study abroad students, but it is just, goes to show that unfortunately something will happen at some point on a study abroad program, and you want to make sure that you have the structures in place to respond accordingly, because of course we can't unfortunately prevent all instances of negative situations impacting our students. So on that note, who at the institution is responsible for study abroad safety? And the answer to that question is a very classically academic answer, which is, well, it depends. Every institution is different. Every study abroad office is different. So, of course, you'll have to figure out exactly what works best for your particular institution. However, my recommendation is that in all cases there is a designated person or a designated team responsible for health and safety. And ideally, that responsibility should be baked into their job description or job portfolio. That way, so there's no ambiguity with regards to, well, whose job is it to make sure that our study abroad programs are safe. So on that note, to give you an example of who is responsible for health and safety at MSU, for many years there was a health and safety analyst within the Office of Study Abroad here. This person's full-time responsibility was the health and safety for all study abroad programs at the university. Just one quick note on the structure here. This isn't the entirety of our study abroad office. Many of my colleagues at the business office, for example, and our peer advisors are not on this graph just simply because there's not enough room to fit our giant team on here. But I am just trying to point to the analyst position specifically. But then you'll notice on the bottom half of the slide, the current structure looks similar but a little bit different. In August 2015, MSU restructured its health and safety unit by expanding the mandate to include responsibility for not just study abroad programs, but non-credit international travelers as well, so faculty, staff, and also some students who may be doing non-credit bearing activities, like, for example, volunteering as part of a registered student organization. So this restructuring meant that we brought on board a second full-time staff member to act as the Director for International Health and Safety. And actually, the entire unit was pulled out of the Office of Study Abroad and became its own unit. So like I mentioned, as the coordinator, I still work very, very closely with the Office of Study Abroad, but technically am a part of a separate unit. We've been liking this structure at MSU. It's been working really well for us, but it's certainly not the only way or even necessarily the best way to structure things. There's a lot of variety in the education abroad field in terms of where their health and safety position is situated. I know colleagues of mine at other universities, some of them are part of study abroad still, some of them are part of the Office of Risk Management, some are part of an associate provost office. So again, I think the specific structure is less important than having a clear understanding of exactly who it is at the institution who oversees study abroad safety. In addition to having a dedicated health and safety team, I would strongly recommend establishing an oversight committee if you don't already have one in place. I know that most institutions probably have something that looks a little bit similar to what I have on this slide here. The reason why I recommend having a committee is because things like risk assessments, the development of emergency response protocols, and decisions like whether or not it has become unsafe to continue a study abroad program in a particular area, those big decisions really should ideally not fall on the shoulders of one individual. It really should be something that is within the purview of a committee of relevant stakeholders. So at MSU, we have what is called the Risk and Security Assessment Committee, or RSAC. RSAC's responsibilities include a variety of things related to overseeing health, safety, security for our study abroad programs. Particularly relevant is its role in establishing policies like how do we evaluate what is considered a high-risk destination, what procedures do we have in place for reviewing proposals for study abroad programs that want to take place in those higher risk locations, that type of thing. And you can see on the right-hand slide there an example of how we have identified stakeholders on campus and how they are represented within the committee. So now we're going to move more into the nitty-gritty, if you will, of how we actually go about promoting safety on our study abroad programs now that we've figured out, okay, who it is that is responsible for that role. So this list is what we recommend as elements of a study abroad program that proactively considers and takes steps to mitigate health, safety, and security risks. I won't read through the entire list here. My understanding is that these slides will be made available later, so you know, I'll try not to be boring and just go through the whole list here. But I did want to draw your attention to a few items in particular. So as you build your study abroad portfolio, you will want to have very clear and established policies like how programs, particularly new programs, are reviewed for health and safety. We, for example, at MSU, anytime a prospective program leader wants to propose a program, they do need to complete a very formal proposal in addition to a site visit, and there is a health and safety component to that formal program proposal. I suspect that is something quite common. Most of you listening in are probably nodding your head saying, yeah, exactly, we do that too. We also have a specific policy in place for any program that is looking to travel to a destination with a Department of State travel warning. I know that was the details about exactly what that means for what the Department of State is saying about risk related to that country was already covered, which was really great. And that's something that we take very seriously at MSU. And anytime there is a travel warning for a country, anyone looking to travel to that country on a study abroad program needs to go through, the program needs to go through an additional screening process. Essentially, the program leader needs to make a waiver request to our Risk and Security Assessment Committee, who reviews that request and makes a recommendation to the provost, who is the ultimate authority in terms of deciding whether or not a waiver should be granted. Pre-departure orientation is also a cornerstone to study abroad programming and should, of course, include a health and safety component. At MSU, what we've done is we moved to doing an online health and safety orientation that is required of all students. They must complete that online before they go abroad. And this is meant to be a supplement to the program-specific and country-specific pre-departure orientation that they do usually in person with either the Office of Study Abroad or their particular program leader. The last thing I wanted to point to is you'll recall that one of the key points that was laid out in the Forum on Education Abroad Standard 8 was the need to have appropriate insurance, and I know that was also mentioned in the previous presentation, and I just cannot emphasize the importance of that enough. At MSU, we have mandatory international health insurance coverage for our students. This includes medical coverage, repatriation coverage, and it also includes political unrest and natural disaster coverage in the event that we need to evacuate our students from a location that becomes unsafe. While your institution likely already has insurance coverage in place, I did actually want to spend just a second on it in order to highlight it as a tool that can actually help you build health and safety capacity as well. In addition to providing political unrest and natural disaster evacuation coverage, many of these insurance providers, a component of that is also intelligence information and security briefings. These can be incredibly helpful to your health and safety person or your health and safety team in figuring out what's happening on the ground. They can also be a really valuable tool in sorting through what is a credible report and what is maybe just a sensationalized media report. So that is another tool that if you're not already making use of, I would strongly recommend that you do that, especially if maybe you're a one-person office responsible for the health and safety of all of your study abroad programs. Certainly I can imagine you might want to have some extra help, and I think that is a very valuable resource that I wanted to make sure was not overlooked. So proactively considering study abroad safety will hopefully go a long way towards mitigating risks to students when they travel internationally. But of course, we unfortunately cannot prevent everything, which is why a crucial component to study abroad safety is having an effective crisis response structure. So rather than go through all the individual protocols that we have in place at MSU, what I thought I would do is just offer a visual representation of our immediate crisis response structure. This particular visual is one of the things that we share very widely with our program leaders and our students during their orientation, for program leaders also during their mandatory emergency training that we do with them before they go abroad. And I think it's really important to share this widely so that everyone on both the administrative and the participant side knows what to do if something does go wrong. So all MSU study abroad travelers are given guidance on when and how to call for local emergency responders in the event that they need emergency assistance. They also know that they should call the MSU 24-hour international assistance line should they require urgent assistance. And it's myself and the Director for International Health and Safety. We are actually the people on the other end of that 24-hour international assistance line. It is also important to note that crisis response is a collaborative effort. So while there is typically a single person at any given time who is acting as the on-call responder, that doesn't necessarily mean that that person is or should be acting alone. They act usually as the initial point of contact in terms of the person who literally picks up the phone and takes that initial call, and they usually do lead the effort in mobilizing resources. But again, what's key to that is the fact that there are other resources available to them. So in our case, we work particularly closely with the university physicians, sometimes the MSU police. Sometimes I'm on the phone with our insurance provider to activate an insurance case. Sometimes we need to reach out to the U.S. Embassy. So that's something to keep in mind, too, that while there should be one designated or two designated point people, it is very much a collaborative effort in terms of marshaling resources to respond to a student who may be in crisis. So I just wanted to close with some final tips for enhancing safety on study abroad. As your study abroad portfolio increases, so will your need to have a system in place to respond to safety issues when they arise. I sort of already alluded to the 24-hour emergency line that we have at MSU, but having a designated phone number that study abroad participants can call and can reach someone at 24/7 is very crucial. I know that other institutions may have, like we do at MSU, one or two people who assume responsibility for responding to calls that come in through this line. But I did want to mention that if you are a smaller institution, maybe you're just starting to build your capacity, one good tip is that you could potentially make use of a third-party provider to be the person responding to that. I know that maybe it is a third-party provider who is on site with your students. Sometimes even a third-party provider, if they are an insurance provider, might be able to offer that capacity. So if it's not feasible for someone at your institution to assume this role, don't assume that that means that therefore you cannot have a 24-hour line. That might be something you might be able to outsource, if you will, to another individual. The key, whether it's someone on site, whether it's a third party, whether it is someone on your home campus, the key is to have A, a well-trained person available to answer the phone when it rings, and B, to advertise this phone number widely. I included a screenshot of the in case of emergency wallet cards that we distribute to all of our study abroad participants, and we give those out like candy on MSU campus. So I would strongly recommend that you do the same. Another general tip that I think is especially relevant to capacity building is to emphasize the local as much as possible. And by that, I mean following local media, following local consular messaging. That's often the best way to stay on top of local safety and security issues. I would also recommend working to establish close relationships with local partners and providers. That can be absolutely key to giving you confidence that your students are safe when they're on site if you have an engaged and efficient on-site source of support. And then my third point there about not underestimating more common safety concerns is something that we've been talking about at MSU a lot recently. In the aftermath of what happened in Paris in November, and then the more recent attacks in Brussels and in Istanbul, we certainly don't want to give the impression that we are in any way underestimating the potential for terrorist events. We're following the security situation in the cities where we have students and where we are sending students very, very closely. And we're sharing information with study abroad programs and offering safety tips to our travelers. But another thing that we're doing is also emphasizing to our students and program leaders that it is equally important to not lose sight of the more everyday safety concerns that, frankly, in my opinion, are probably more likely to impact your students negatively. Anecdotally, just to kind of highlight this point is, while the events in Paris and Brussels and in Istanbul are certainly very upsetting, the thing that I have found most challenging since starting my role at MSU has actually been dealing with student mental health issues abroad. So we want to make sure that our students and our program leaders are not thinking about the potential for safety security issues, but they're also thinking about some of those more everyday things that could negatively impact their study abroad experience as well. I wanted to close and offer one final recommendation that was already touched on, but that was if your institution is not already a member of OSAC, the Overseas Security Advisory Council, I strongly recommend you do become a member. I promise that I am not just saying this because I know the State Department is part of this webinar. I have found OSAC to be a really essential partner. In addition to providing daily briefings, contact with their risk analyst is really helpful. I can tell you that when something happens overseas, it makes me feel a whole lot better to be able to pick up the phone and call someone there who's able to help me sort through, okay, what exactly is happening on the ground? What does this mean for the safety profile of that place? Those analysts have also been able to get me in touch with regional security officers at consular offices, which is extremely helpful. So if you are not already an OSAC member, I do feel that you're missing out. So I would recommend that you look into getting that membership. So thank you very much for your attention. I know this was a bit of a basic overview, but I hope it was helpful in giving you kind of a bird's eye view of how we deal with health and safety at MSU. And if you're looking to expand your portfolio or build your study abroad safety capacity, I hope it was helpful. And I'm happy to elaborate on any specifics during the Q&A portion. So thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Maureen. That was very informative, really good information. I think that a lot of people will take into account when trying to develop study abroad programs in the future. And now we're going to turn it over to Dan Spiess, who is the Assistant Director for Postdoctoral Affairs and Career Development at the University of Chicago. And Dan is going to tell us a little bit about a few initiatives that University of Chicago is doing that are very unique.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Carolyn. I guess a couple points of clarification. So my name is Dan Spiess, and I am indeed the Assistant Director for Postdoctoral Affairs and Career Development, which might sound confusing to you. When I started, I was actually International Affairs and Postdoctoral Support. So I still do a lot of international work here at the university. Another point of clarification is that when we talk about study abroad here at the University of Chicago, study abroad is a very specific undergraduate program. So we support across the university through central administration all travelers, undergraduate, graduate, postdocs, faculty, and staff. So anybody traveling abroad, we support. The study abroad program, which we work very closely with, they actually have a few more requirements, such as a mandatory orientation and things like that. But generally, anyone traveling abroad, everything is basically not mandatory. So we try to emphasize safety and emergencies, but we also try and create for a whole travel experience for everyone. We feel that makes it much more enticing, and people are much more willing to pay attention to us and to use our travel registry, for example. And during I held focus groups when I first started, and I heard from a lot of students that not only were they grateful that the university was watching out for them for emergencies, but they also wanted a lot more information on visas, information on passports, information on health, information on our alumni. They are hanging out in Lima, Peru for a week waiting for paperwork to process. They would love to get together with alumni. So we tried to respond to that here at the university. I've been asked to focus on a couple of things that we do here that we're quite proud of. I also should say that we are a very collaborative effort, kind of like Michigan State. We work very closely with our area studies centers and the directors of our area studies centers, our Office of Global Engagement, our Study Abroad Office, our Office of Risk Management, our Office of International Affairs, and our Communications Office. We have a very, very strong working relationship across campus with all of these. So even though undergraduates are not part of my purview, I work very closely with that office. This comes in handy, especially during emergencies. We have a small core team. I wish we had the crisis response name the State Department does. We call it the First Alert Team, FAT. So FAT is on board. And we monitor global events all the time. And if somebody hears something, they contact the rest of the team. And then we decide if we have to respond and elevate this up to the vice presidential or the provost or president level. UChicago Traveler, traveler.uchicago.edu is our travel registry. This has been talked about for years. And finally, we started doing some homework on this about almost 3 years ago. It had been recommended by a provost ad hoc committee on international travel, and so we went with that recommendation. We did our due diligence. We looked at off-the-shelf products. We talked to our peers to see how they enjoy those off-the-shelf products. We decided ultimately to build it in-house. So me and my colleague Carmen in Global Engagement worked very closely with our IT services department to build this. It took about 6 months to build. We launched it September 19th, 2014. Just because you launch it does not mean they will use it. So getting the word out has been incredibly a high priority for us. We do road shows, basically. We meet with anybody that we know who has international travelers, deans of students, area studies coordinators, our alumni office, anybody. And that's been very helpful. So up to, I think I checked on Monday, we are just under 2,500 registrants, which is great because prior to September 19th, 2014, we had nothing. And this kind of grew out of emergency response. We had no idea where people were in the world. So this actually helps us greatly, especially during the Paris attacks, as Maureen mentioned. We still reach out to the divisions and schools. That's kind of a belts and suspenders redundancy, which is good in this case. People log in with their CNET ID just like they would any other application. We only require 5 pieces of information: your name, your affiliation, name your trip, country you're going to, and dates of travel. It takes 2 minutes. You can offer more information. We love more information. But that's all we require. We wanted to make this as easy as possible so people use it. Give your trip a name, and you can add destination if you want to give us the city or region. Quite often there is no city because they're doing field work in some jungle in Madagascar. You can give us a hotel or a place you're working out of. We also ask for a cell phone, or a preferred phone, I should say. It could be your domestic cell phone, an international cell phone, your preferred email, UChicago or Gmail or whatever. We'll contact you 3 different ways: phone, text, and email in an emergency. We also ask for emergency contacts, domestic and abroad, if you have them. And then once you submit, you are registered. You will get a confirmation email, but I should also note prior to that, that everything you register is editable at any time. So let's say your plans change while you're abroad. You can go in, change it, and we'll know where you are. Also, every trip you take can be multiple destinations. So let's say you're studying in China for a month, you decide to go to Japan for a week, you can enter that in, so we will know you don't have to do a whole separate trip. They're all together. You get a confirmation email which covers most of the things I covered on the first slide, such as the State Department, the STEP program, information on health insurance, on our travel clinic, which offers immunizations, and things like that. And then the next part, I guess, we were talking about another kind of thing that I think most people don't talk about is IT and communications. And our IT services department has this information that we also try and promote across the university. We talk about mobile devices, international roaming, international data plans. Probably most sensitively, we talk about accessing UChicago resources. If you have restricted file shares or more protected resources, you can actually log on to our virtual private network from anywhere. We are also part of EduRoam, which I think is, 3,500 institutions worldwide. So you can log on using your CNET ID just as you would here in Chicago. We also talk about, which I think people really don't understand, restrictions on encryption software. So that involves encrypted software both leaving the U.S. and entering other countries. And there are certain countries where they really restrict the import of encryption software, such as Burma and China and Iran and Israel and places like that. So we do have information on IT Services website about those restrictions and why you should be careful. And finally, I'll talk about our global presence, and that kind of takes two forms. One is our global centers abroad. We're in Beijing, Delhi, Paris, and we are currently constructing Hong Kong. We're in a temporary location, but that should hopefully be done next year. These have been a great resource for people traveling abroad. Even if you're not in, say, Beijing, you can access services through the Beijing office. They're very, very helpful with anything local to either the city or the country, and even as a regional presence as well. These serve as places for people to study, for people to give presentations, for people to teach classes. We have a huge amount of events. They could be lectures, they could be receptions involving our scholars, faculty, students, staff, and local scholars, local alumni. It's been a really great resource, and people are definitely taking advantage of it. Obviously, this is something that is not, it involves some kind of investment, but we've really been seeing a great use of it as well. And finally, our alumni. We have clubs all over the world. We have alumni all over the world, as I'm sure many of you do. We really try and access that. We try and point our students to the alumni database. So places they're going, reach out to an alum. They love this, and especially the alumni clubs. The alumni clubs put on a lot of events, and they welcome anybody from UChicago. So we really have been trying to emphasize that along with our Alumni Relations and Development Department. So really, this is kind of the very quick, hopefully very quick, overview of a couple of things we're doing at the university. And again, collaboration is key, and trying to also emphasize safety, but also emphasizing support for the entire travel experience.
Great. Thank you so much, Dan. I think we are going to open it up for a brief Q&A session. So if anybody has questions, please submit them in the chat box in Webex or via Twitter at GoGlobalEd. And we will take a couple of questions, and then we will finish up. Okay, so we do have our first question that is for Maureen. It says, in reference to crisis response, how do you inform parents, and also considering the fact that parents sometimes learn about an incident even before the program director or the university? How do you handle those kinds of calls?
Yeah, absolutely. So can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you, and we're going to be able to see you in a second. There we go.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a great question. So there's kind of two parts when it comes to informing parents. One is, let's say there's a specific incident with a student, something has happened to their son or daughter, and we're needing to respond to that. And then the other piece of it, too, is, what happens when there's just some type of major event and students or parents are concerned about a study abroad program in general, whether it's currently overseas or whether it's going overseas. So I'll deal with the first one first. We have specific protocol in terms of at what point can we contact a student's emergency contact person in the event that something has happened to that student. Certainly, if a student is incapacitated or hospitalized or unable to communicate for themselves, at that point we do reach out to who they have designated to be their emergency contact person. We have a database where they have submitted that information. More often than not, it is the parent, but every once in a while, it might be another individual. So we are a little bit careful to make sure that we're only reaching out to the person they've designated as their emergency contact. We also do have students include a disclaimer. Basically, there's a box that they can check on their study abroad application that says, I designate this person to be my emergency contact and give you permission to release information to them. So as long as that box is it has been checked, even if it's not to the point where a student is incapacitated or hospitalized, if there's anything that we need the parent to know, as long as that box is checked off, we usually feel pretty comfortable reaching out to them in that instance. And the other piece in terms of, let's say it's not a particular student who's in crisis, but there's some type of more general crisis happening in country, we have not actually been sending emails directly to parents. I do know that colleagues of mine at other universities have done that, but we opted not to. We opted to instead send that communication direct to the students and also update our webpage with just a general statement. I do speak with parents whenever they call me. I've been speaking with a lot of parents, and I'm more than happy to speak with them when they do call. But usually, unless it's something specific to the student, we usually don't reach out to parents directly.
Great. Thank you so much, Maureen. I think we have a follow-up question that you would probably be best able to address. It's how can we prepare for cases of mental health situations or emergencies in semester and year-long programs? What kind of advice or guidance does MSU have for mental health situations?
Yeah, that is such a good question and a really challenging situation. It's funny, the timing of this, we just had a workshop yesterday with a lot of our faculty-led program leaders on this issue, but I understand the question is more for those exchange or direct enroll programs. Obviously, trying to do the best pre-departure preparation is really key to trying to getting out in front of the issue. Something that we have set up at MSU is that we do ask students to submit a self-disclosure health form when they apply to a study abroad program. That form is sent directly to our MSU travel clinic and is reviewed by professionals there. If they see anything on the health form that causes them to just have some questions for the student, they will reach out to the student and encourage the student to come in for a consultation. In the event that it's some type of mental health issue, I know that the big question that the travel clinic is asking that student is basically, what is your plan? So let's say, for instance, the student is on some type of medication. It's, have you considered whether or not you're able to legally import that medication into the country? If you're not, let's talk about how we get around that problem. Similarly, if students are currently in, let's say, a weekly counseling or something like that, have you thought about your plan for continuing that counseling if that's something you want to do abroad? And usually at that point, I'm looped in and I work with our insurance provider to set that up ahead of time. That's obviously the ideal situation because, like I said, these health forms are self-disclosed medical information. The student is not obligated to disclose any information on that form. So it is entirely possible, and I know, of course, that it does happen that we have students who do have some type of mental health issue and they do not disclose on that form. We try as best as possible to have really good working relationships with an on-site contact at our host institutions. Usually they're able to check in with our students in the event that something does happen. Having a good insurance provider and a good relationship with your insurance provider helps as well in terms of being able to set up some type of counseling appointments over there. Again, ideally, you want to set those up ahead of time, but sometimes, unfortunately, you only become involved when the situation or when the student is really in distress. So we try as much as possible to emphasize pre-departure planning for students, whether it's through the health form or just trying to get to them through the orientation and emphasizing you can still go abroad if you do have some type of mental health issue, but have a plan. And if you want help establishing that plan, then make sure that you come and speak with us. Other than that, we do really hope that they know to reach out to us if they get abroad and something does happen, or our on-site contacts over there might be able to alert us to something that might be going on.
Great, thank you so much. We do have a couple of other questions, so we are going to stay on the line a few more minutes. Our next question is for Dan. This question is, I can imagine that some faculty may have been resistant to registering their travel, fearing almost a big brother presence that the university would be poking around in their business. So how did you address this? Was this an issue at all? Or what kind of questions did you get from your faculty about your registry?
I like the fact that you think this is a resolved issue, and it's not. Getting faculty buy-in for this is an ongoing issue, and buy-in from everyone. And it's buy-in and awareness. So as I said, we've been doing road shows to anybody and everybody, and quite often we are seeing, and hopefully seeing more, faculty seeing the fact that their students are actually signing up for our travel registry. The fact that we ask for so little information, I think, is also a good thing, and that was on purpose. We didn't want to be Big Brother or even perceived as Big Brother. So we tried to keep it as simple and minimal as possible by reaching out to everyone, including faculty, but I don't want to say everyone around the faculty, but we do. We don't limit it just to students or just to faculty. We actually reach out to everyone. So working with the deans of students has been very key. Working with the area studies coordinators has been great. And kind of trying to also show by example how useful the travel registry has been during emergencies. During the Paris attacks, this was like, I think it was, I don't know, probably 4 o'clock here in Chicago on a Friday, and people were traveling and they're gone, but we were able to pull up and see everyone who was in the registry, who was there in Paris. Same thing with the earthquake in Nepal. I was on the East Coast and I woke up Sunday morning at 7:30 and I was able to, in 1 minute, find out who was in Nepal. Of course, we still reach out to everyone, deans of students, and our network, kind of like an email chain, I guess. But I think people are seeing the use and the usefulness of the travel registry and in central administration's role in monitoring. But I think it's just advertise, 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 advertise.
Great, thanks for your answer. We have a question from IFLE here, from Cheryl Gibbs for Maureen. So I'm going to place you on the video now.
No, just you.
Oh, just Maureen.
Maureen, I have a question with the focus on, and I guess this could have been for Chicago as well, but with the focus on providing access to community college students and minority students, underrepresented students. Do you have programs at Michigan State that target these populations since they are most unlikely to have had any overseas experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't do anything specific from like a health and safety orientation perspective. We certainly encourage our students, if they have any sort of follow-up questions that they feel weren't addressed in orientations, to come and meet with me, and I do often meet with students. But I will give you one example of one way that we're trying to reach out to underrepresented students. We have a very successful program that ends up targeting mostly first-generation students and particularly students of color through migrant student services that we have here on campus. they run a big spring break program to Mexico, and they are groups of there's about 4 groups of 30 that go every spring break. And so that's one example of the way the Study Abroad Office has reached out and developed this really good strategic partnership to get a lot of students to go on study abroad that are in that population of underrepresented students. And I usually do a specific orientation for them and for their program leaders. That's sort of specific to those programs and specific to Mexico, where they will be traveling. So that's one example. And I do know that it's actually a colleague of mine at the Office of Study Abroad who is our diversity lead. That's one of our Generation Study Abroad goals, is to increase our enrollment of students from underrepresented populations. So I know that that's something that the Study Abroad Office is specifically working on, but I'm sorry I'm not as involved with their kind of enrollment and recruitment stuff. So they would be the best people to speak with on that.
Okay, great. Well, I know we've run 15 minutes over, so we really appreciate everyone who's still on the line. We hope this has been a useful session. We want to thank Maureen and Dan and our colleagues from the State Department for their excellent presentations. A lot of food for thought for all of us going forward as we think about study abroad. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.